Say something. How's that sound? How's it sound? Does it sound good? I'm giving a speech on Amanita. It's more of a presentation, but you know, it'll be fun. We'll be talking and going and flowing, and I'll be making jokes and making everybody smile and feel good inside. Like they're reconnecting with God and the Christ. I think we're ready to start. We'll probably have some more people come in, I hope. But yeah, thank you guys for being here. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. If anybody's talked to me throughout this past couple days, I think you'll know that already. Hopefully you'll figure that out by the end of this this lecture or presentation or whatever. Who saw me talk last year? Yes, yeah, part of it? Cool, awesome, awesome. Well, it's good to see all the new faces. I'm glad you guys are back. This is the same PowerPoint presentation as last year. I'm going to expand in much different ways though, and then I have another presentation, short, little, concise, 10-minute of the story of Amanita throughout history, essentially, and how it's had its hand in guiding our human projection. So yeah, my name's Christian Rasmussen. We're talking about Amanita Muscaria, the divine inebriant. Christian Rasmussen. I'm the owner of Ethnobotanicals. We're the largest retailers of Amanita Muscaria here in North America, potentially the world. I was the first to start selling Amanita here in the States, which, at least to scale, wasn't that long ago, only 4 years ago, but it's a new burgeoning market that we're really at the forefront of. Gabriel Hardy is a co-owner in the business as well, who's being so gracious to film this. And then, yeah, if anybody wants to like rewatch this, fortunately it'll be filmed and it'll be thrown on our YouTube page, as I mentioned, and we're going to be talking about Amanita Muscaria. You know, the Mario mushroom, the Alice in Wonderland mushroom, most iconic mushroom in the world, in children's books, TV shows, stories. It's the mushroom emoji on your phone, connection with Christ, connection with the Vedas, etc., etc., etc. If you ask a child to draw a mushroom, pretty much all the time they'll always draw an Amanita. We've done tests with this too. They don't even need to have like seen these mushrooms, and it's part of our DNA. It's like it's part of us. But yeah, I mean, literally, like ask a kid to draw a mushroom, they're always going to draw the mushroom with the white dots on it.
Maybe a red Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But it's like why is this? You know, like there's something, and you know, we have our theories and we have evidence to back up the theories. But the more and more I get into it, the more I understand why it is, and we'll get into that. But yeah, so it grows on nearly every continent except for Antarctica. So it's really been everywhere. Most indigenous people had access to it, particularly with trade and whatnot. But it's likely the most psychoactive plant fungi in ancient times used aside from cannabis. It appears to have had a very sacred place in various rituals and rites. These are both depictions of Adam and Eve with Amanita Muscaria. So in here they're covering themselves with Amanita caps as opposed to the fig leaves that we hear about nowadays. This is a little self-explanatory. Yeah. It's thought to be soma, the famed drink of the gods from the Vedic hymns. There's some controversy around this, but man, I'm telling you, if you read Gordon Wasson's Soma, Divine Mushroom of Immortality, like it's really, really hard to deny. Like there's people that, it's almost like, to us, it almost seems like one of the crown jewels of conspiracies, because it seems like it's been so actively suppressed, and academia has very actively tried to like push people away from it. Why is that? Well, it's literally like the most healing thing on the face of this earth. Like I've done everything. We've talked with people that have done everything. This mushroom elicits transformation more than anything else out there, like bar none. And it's the most iconic mushroom in the world, depicted in art, architecture, stories throughout human history. Oh, also, if anybody has any questions throughout this, like raise your hand, ask right away. We don't need to wait to the end. We'll flow with it. So yeah, any questions, just let me know. The Christmas connection is a fun one. Siberian shamans wore red and white. Actually, the word shaman comes from Siberia, comes from the Koryak tribe, the Amanita mushroom eaters. Interesting. Now, shaman is used, worldwide for, South American shamans are what most people think about, but really it was Amanita users that coined the term.
Can I help you for a minute?
Yeah.
On the other slide, it's not on the slide, but you had mentioned a book on Amanita.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but it's Soma, the Divine Mushroom of Immortality by Gordon Wasson. Yeah, Gordon Wasson, Wasson.
Okay.
Yep. It's Soma by Gordon Wasson. Yeah, it's a dense book. It's not like the most fun thing to read. It's a lot of etymology and like linguistics and stuff, but he tracks, words throughout, history and ties it all into Amanita. And like the debate with Soma and the Vedics it's an interesting debate. There's a lot of credence to both sides for sure, because it's ambiguous. Like the mushroom cults, back in the day, like the mushroom cults were the most secretive thing. Like we didn't talk about it, they didn't write about it, this was a thing. Like there's a lot of evidence that the ancient Egyptians used Amanita muscaria as well, quite a bit, but they don't write about it. They don't put it in their glyphs. Where like blue lotus flower, for instance, like it's on their stelas, it's everywhere. But Amanita, it's very likely that they used it, but they don't talk about it because the mushroom cults were all very secretive. And maybe that plays into what we're going to at this point in human history. Maybe it plays into the story that's panning out, or that's about to pan out.
So if there were all the mushroom cults, why necessarily that there would all be Amanita Muscaria, considering the fact that there are so many, like all around all the world?
Yeah. It's definitely not all Amanita muscaria, for sure, but it's the blue mushroom and the red mushroom, right? The psilocybes and the Amanita, like the main psychoactive mushrooms. Yeah. Definitely not all Amanita, but Amanita, it's just such a different, it's so different. And like, I mean, when you get into these like iconic, religious depictions and whatnot, it is Amanita much more than psilocybin. And I think maybe throughout this presentation we'll discover a little bit more why, but I think really the way to discover why is to experience the transformation that Amanita elicits, and you'll be like, oh shit, yeah, this is the Christ mushroom. Like it makes sense, it makes sense, yeah. So, yeah, Christmas connection. Siberian shamans were red and white. They would propel down the chimney to deliver Amanita due to snowdrift. Snow would cover up the yurts. The chimneys would be open. The Siberian shamans would go down the chimney. They'd deliver the Amanitas or whatever to the people. They'd hang them on the coniferous trees that they brought inside for their winter solstice rituals. They would also hang them on the mantle above the fireplace to dry. And reindeer really enjoy eating Amanita. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of these connections. Come on in, brother. Good, man. So what's so special about Amanita? We'll get into the pharmacology a little bit. I won't bore you guys too much, but muscimol is a potent and selective orthosteric agonist of the GABA A receptors. GABAs are inhibitory neurotransmitter. Alcohol, anti-anxiety medications like Ativan, Valium, Klonopin, and Xanax affect the GABA receptors. So I'm going to use this time to tell a little bit of a story about how I got into this. So I was an opiate addict and a benzo addict during my 20s. Bad drug addict. I got off of opiates at the end of my 20s, 2018, 2019. Not fun, not an easy experience, but I knew what I was getting into. I had gotten off and on that stuff plenty of times. I had never gotten off of benzos. I was on Klonopin and Xanax for 10 years, and I never took a break from it because I knew people always spoke about how it was the worst thing in the world to get off of. Like benzos are the hardest thing in the world to get off of, and unfortunately there's 10 million plus people prescribed and addicted to benzodiazepines in the United States. It's a huge epidemic. It's not spoken about as much as opiates because it's not like killing people like opioids are. It's really hard to overdose off of benzodiazepines, but it's a big issue. If anybody has experience with benzos in this room, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's fucking brutal. It's brutal. Yeah, brutal. So I was off these drugs for a year, and I was still in withdrawal. It's really brain damage. You're dealing with the damaged GABA and glutamate system at this point, but I was still in massive withdrawal. I felt like I had healed maybe 5-10%, living in terror day to day. My ex-wife and I's relationship was on the fritz. Like, I mean, it was I can't even put into words how awful it was. And I was ready to take my life. I was done. I was ready to be done. And I was walking through the woods. I'm close to my parents' house, contemplating this like end of life. And there were these mushrooms growing, and beautiful. They're beautiful mushrooms in nature. I don't know if anybody's ever seen them in nature, but absolutely stunning. So there were these Amanita mushrooms growing, the Gasoi variety, which are the orange caps that we get in Minnesota. And there was this, and I know pretty much, I'm sure everybody's felt this pull before. This pull can be with substances. It can be with if you get the pull to try like ayahuasca or psilocybin. The easiest thing to recognize the pull is the pull with the relationship. You have a relationship that's important to you, you get a magnetic pull towards this person. The strongest magnetic pull that I had ever felt at this point in my life with these mushrooms. And in this energetic exchange. It felt like there was information. They were conversing with me. They were talking to me. And looking back, in a sense, what they said was, we have something for you, and in return, you're going to do something for us. And so I was like, whoa, okay. Pick the mushrooms, and I go up to the house, and I do some research, and I find that it's poisonous, it's toxic, it's going to kill you. Stories of reports on Arrowhead of people taking 20 grams, like fresh out of the ground, and getting super sick and having a horrible experience, which is akin to like a 16-year-old like downing a bottle of vodka for their first drink. Not a good way to go about it. And it's all just bad. And then there's one woman online who's talking about how she utilized Amanita to heal her brain after getting off of benzodiazepines. And this woman is Amanita Dreamer. So if anybody wants to look into this, like look into Dreamer. She's a really good homie. She's a good friend of mine at this point. But she had just started her channel. This is in 2020. She had just started her channel a few months ago, had her story, same story. She was actually walking through the woods to kill herself. She was going to kill herself. Saw these mushrooms, heart pull, magnetism, picked them, went to the house, research, toxic, blah, blah, blah. And then she found that they hit the GABA and the glutamate system. Remember what I was saying earlier, benzos damage the GABA and the glutamate system. So I was at the end of my road, and I was like, fuck it, I'm going to try, excuse my language, I'm going to swear a little bit. It's just how I work. But I was at the end of my road, and so I tried it, and I microdosed for 2 weeks, and I took a couple larger doses. We'll get into dosing parameters in a minute, but I took a couple larger doses in there. Instantly, the first experience, I took a microdose, and I had this huge psychic moment. I'll tell the quick story. My sister got a box of grapes at her vineyard from California, and there were all these lizards in it, and she was telling me on the phone about this lizard that she got and brought home and made a little habitat for. And in the middle of her, and there's a microdose, such a small dose, but I felt instant relief when I took it, and it was an energetic thing, really, more so than a pharmacological thing. But as she's telling me about this lizard, I go, Frank? She's like, yeah, how did you know that I named him Frank? And so that was kind of cool. And that ties in more into the story later on that we'll get into, because we found that this mushroom increases intuition, psychic abilities, vibration, unlike anything else out there. Hence the Christ mushroom, another aspect of this. But yeah, within 2 weeks of utilizing the mushroom, I was 80% healed, and it was miraculous, saved my life. And 6 months later, the business was born. So we found that, being a GABA agonist, being non-addictive, non-habit forming, because it's a selective orthosteric agonist, it's the best thing in the world to get off of alcohol, anti-anxiety medications, anything that hits GABA. Amanita beats everything. It's the best. And these are the hardest drugs to get off of generally. The only receptors that, if you're withdrawing from GABA, it can kill you. Amanita works absolutely wonders for this. So muscimol, mood elevation, it relaxes one. GABA's our inhibitory system, so it lowers inhibitions, increases sociability, increases mood, with a mild hallucinogenic property that can be quite pronounced at large doses. We'll get into that a little bit later as well. GABA agonism is really nice, and muscimol is a really wonderful compound. But there's other stuff going on in Amanita as well. Ibotenic acid is the original compound. So when Amanita is growing in the ground, it only produces ibotenic acid. Ibotenic acid then converts or decarboxylates into muscimol via time, via drying, via heat and acidity. Back to what I was saying with people picking 20 grams out of the ground and eating it and getting really sick. That's because ibotenic acid levels are through the roof and there's no muscimol because it hasn't had the chance to convert yet. So if you're picking Amanita out of the ground and eating it, if you don't take the right dose, if you don't just nibble on it, most people are going to get sick. It's too much ibotenic acid. You need to dry the mushrooms to convert it into muscimol. And then we convert it even further utilizing heat and acidity, which I'll get to a little bit later. That being said, ibotenic acid is not a bad compound. There's hit pieces that they put out on this. It's conspiracy. It's pretty crazy when you dive into it. But so people are afraid of ibotenic acid a lot when really it's a really magical compound. You just got to get the measurements right. You got to get the dosing right. So ibotenic acid, non-selective glutamate receptor agonist affecting the NMDA receptors. Other things that affect the NMDA receptors are ketamine, PCP, or traditional dissociatives. Ketamine is very known for increasing neuroplasticity. NMDA receptors have a big hand in that. It's a prodrug for muscimol, as I mentioned, so it converts to muscimol or decarboxylates into muscimol in the body or in the mushroom itself. So when you eat ibotenic acid, it also decarbs into muscimol in the body. NMDA is the glutamate receptor system. Yeah, so glutamate receptors in the body. Yep. So and so like your GABA and your glutamate system are very intertwined. When GABA's high, glutamate's low. When GABA's low, glutamate's high. So when you take something like benzos or alcohol and your GABA is high constantly and your glutamate's low, when you get off of them, your system's fried, and glutamate, which is your excitatory neurotransmitter, is through the roof, and your inhibitory transmitter is super low. So you're extremely anxious and terrified constantly. Yeah. It can be neurotoxic at high doses. Most users prefer to convert it to muscimol prior to consuming the mushroom. That being said, the neurotoxicity is really like the studies show, the data shows. So the original study that they did to say that ibotenic acid is neurotoxic is they took isolated synthetic ibotenic acid in huge amounts, like we're talking like kilos and kilos of Amanita worth of ibotenic acid, and they directly injected into the rats' brains, and they're like, oh, this is neurotoxic. It's like, yeah, well, if you like injected my brain with like, 10 grams of ibuprofen, like that shit's gonna be neurotoxic, it's not good. So the studies that actually like study the amount of ibotenic acid that we get, there's really no concern about neurotoxicity. That being said, ibotenic acid can create nausea. It can make people's stomach upset if they take too much. Back to that, we need the balance of the compounds, or we need to take the right dose. Yeah, thought to be negligible in concentrations found in Muscaria. Yeah.
So when it's dried, and it's just to clarify, and it is and then it creates the what was called the
muscimol.
The muscimol.
Yeah.
And the muscimol reduces the nausea symptoms and things like that?
Yeah, well, yeah.
More digestible?
Sure, I mean, it doesn't really make it more digestible. It's just that more ibotenic acid increases the risk of nausea. So the less ibotenic acid we have, the less risk of nausea. Now, once we do a further preparation, and the dose makes the poison, right? So like in a couple grams, a few grams, like I'm on 3.5 grams currently of raw Amanita, and like there won't be any nausea. I can take like 10 or 15 grams personally, but I haven't built like a tank for this stuff. But most people won't get nausea until you hit a certain threshold with dry mushrooms. Most people will get nausea. If I ate like a whole cap raw out of the ground, like that'd make me sick. It wouldn't be fun. But then again, we'll get into preparing further in a minute or two. But yeah, it's just the more ibotenic acid you have, the more likelihood of one getting sick. But if we prepare it properly, we completely negate the risk of getting nauseous. So we'll get into all that. Yeah.
One more quick question. Does ibotenic acid cause any form of a numbing sensation?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it can. What's your thought on that, Gabe?
Of a numbing, like emotional numbing or physical?
Well, no. So a while ago, I was foraging, and I've never been able to get a really good photo of the Amanita just emerging out of the ground. Little buttons,
Yeah.
Still basically under the ground. So I removed some of the soil from around it without touching the mushroom itself, but I just wanted to get a really good photo of it. And then I would say within 20 minutes, my fingers went numb. And then I had a numbness.
Fascinating. That's cool to know.
My neck and my jaw.
Interesting.
And my husband was like, we need to go to the hospital right now.
Oh no, no. Did you go to the hospital?
No.
No, okay.
Because,
That's, yeah.
we were in New Mexico. And it was one of those things where we didn't know where the hospital was. First of all, we were, boondocking out in the woods, and by the time, he found an H sign for a hospital, I'm like, wait a minute, I think we're good.
Yeah.
And, it left us as quickly as it came.
That's so interesting.
No insects anywhere. It was, so that's what I thought, it was the mycelium.
Well,
But however, maybe was that ibotenic acid.
yeah, I don't know. That's interesting. I mean, it would maybe make sense that it could make one numb. I'm curious. I'm going to ask some of our foragers and suppliers overseas I'm going to ask them that. Yeah, I'd be curious. Yeah. And
ask the suppliers and stuff if they've ever experienced that, because if that is a thing, it would definitely be something that they've experienced.
Yeah.
Either one of us have heard of it.
no, and I mean, I've foraged quite a bit, and I haven't ever had anything like that. But I don't know.
I will say this too, though, because something that he's kind of attacking within his speech is there's been this massive sort of like misinformation campaign around Amanita, and the mind is very powerful sometimes, and sometimes there's a possibility with just that notion and that being.
No, it's definitely not a mushroom that I've ever been afraid of, and I feel a pull towards it as well.
Yeah.
So I had no fear. I literally was just so excited about catching a really great photo in that stage, because normally when I see them, they're old,
right?
They're already cracking, they're not beautiful when I finally see them in the woods. So I was just, totally giddy and excited to get the photo.
Yeah. Cool. Interesting. Yeah. We can exchange emails and I can let you know what I figure out. Yeah. Well, and I loved you said you feel a calling towards it. And like, that's what we find. It's really crazy. But like everybody in here, I would imagine you're in here because you feel, if you focus on it, you can kind of feel a little heart pull towards it. Like it's calling you. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is we're in a really unique position to like get this mushroom out to the world. And I can feel the global calling, and like I can actually feel it like in my heart and in my body physically, like the global calling increase, and it increases my ability it increases my gift of gab. Like it makes me better, it makes me more potent at what I do, it's a really interesting thing for us to witness. But yeah, that calling is like, it's what brings everybody in. And it seems like if it's like pushed on somebody or somebody takes it without that calling and they're not ready for it, it either doesn't work for them at all or they just don't have like an experience that they're looking to get. So like people that are looking to get high off of it, yeah, it can be recreational. Like I can have great times on it. That's not what I'm taking it for though. But people that are purely looking to get high off of it, they either don't get anything from it or they have a bad experience with it. Like, and most of the time they don't get anything from it. Yeah. So, thoughts support neuroplasticity and promote neurogenesis, as I mentioned. Muscarine is a cool one. Muscarine is also another one that people are a little afraid of. It's in really low doses in the mushroom, but it hits the acetylcholine receptors, which is what pretty much all the smart drugs or nootropics work on, the acetylcholine system. So it plays a role in memory, learning, attention span. Many smart drugs or nootropics affects the acetylcholine. Largely understudied, but it suggests that it adds to the potent nootropic, promoting verbal fluency, that's a typo, memory, recall, and attention span. Verbally affluent. Other compounds. There's a host of other compounds in Amanita having varying effects. A lot of them, I think we probably know what most of them are, but we don't know what they're doing. So, there's probably a big entourage effect. The three that I mentioned, muscimol, muscarine, and ibotenic acid, they're for sure the big hitters. But there's potentially more that haven't been isolated yet. There's talks that there's a lot of conjecture around Amanita having bufotenine in it for 4-HO-DMT, I believe is bufotenine. Is that correct? 5-HO-DMT, yeah, you would know. Which is a synthetic, it's a tryptamine, not synthetic, it's a tryptamine that's found in the bufo toad, found in a couple other things in nature. So there is, when you get into really high doses, and tryptamines are traditional psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, DMT, those are tryptamines. When you get into high enough doses of Amanita, there can be a little bit of a tryptamine like flair to it. But it's such a different experience all in all than anything like that. And we'll get into that in a second as well. So as we were talking about, preparation is important. Now, the importance is maybe blown out of proportion just a little bit, but it is important, particularly if you're taking larger doses. And then, like, if you take raw Amanita versus preparing it a little bit further, more ibotenic acid versus more muscimol, you have a little bit of a different experience. And you can kind of cater the experience to whatever you want to experience. So, like, we'll get into how to prepare, and we'll go over that. So yeah, decarboxylation is achieved through drying, through heat, and through acidity. So once the mushrooms dry, it gets to a certain point, and then we use heat and acidity to prepare it further. So most people will place the dried mushrooms in a pot of water, boil it with some lemon juice. I say a squirt in here. We want the pH to be like 3 roughly. We don't have to get super specific with it, but roughly 3, and that's, if you have like a couple cups of water, that's about a full lemon's worth of lemon juice, or maybe a couple tablespoons of lemon juice worth. And then boil for 20 to 30 minutes, after which they strain and drink the tea. If you boil it for 2 hours, you're going to get more of a decarb. More of that ibotenic acid is going to convert into muscimol. So you can kind of like play around with how much and how long you want to boil it, just to get different results. And really, everybody's going to want something different. Like your own physiology will kind of dictate, what you need and want. And at some points, you might want non-decarbed at all, and at some points you might want super heavy decarbed, depending on what you're looking to accomplish. So like if you're using it and you want a really, really deep sleep, like you want to decarb a little bit more generally because it's going to have more GABA agonism.
Chris, did you say the dried mushroom, say you take a cup of it and it's just a squirt of the juice?
Yeah, and so like, well, the dried mushroom, you take your weight amount, and generally it's always good to weigh it out, so we want to scale. But then for the pot of water, you take like a couple cups of water, and you can really do however much water you want. You just want to make sure that the water doesn't boil off, because if you're boiling it for an hour and you only have like a cup or two in there, that might boil off completely. So replenish it. But yeah, just and use however much water you want. But then like use a fair amount of lemon juice. Like we're talking like maybe a fifth or sixth of the liquid should be lemon juice, and that gets it to the proper pH. And then you can play with less lemon juice, and less lemon juice will get you less of a decarb as well. And so it's nuanced, and it takes some experimentation and playing around with. But that's also one of the things that makes this mushroom so unique and fascinating and individualized. So,
A friend of mine made some, and he was telling me he put equal parts dried mushroom and lemon juice in it. And he put water in there and he boiled it down, and he said it tasted horrible because
yeah,
I think he put in, when you told me how much lemon juice he put in, I thought that seems like a lot, but I looked up the recipe. Or
some people do half and half. It tastes fucking awful. It doesn't taste good anyways. It doesn't. It's like a really bad mushroom broth. So it's not great, but. Yeah, it's just part of the experience. Honestly, like at this point, I cherish the taste, even though I dislike it. It's like, oh, yep, this is where I'm going, and that's kind of nice. But
do you think you could throw some honey in there at the end?
For sure, yeah. Some people throw cloves, cinnamon, that works really well. Yeah, you can play around with preparation. People put milk in it. A lot of times the milk curdles, which I think is disgusting, but some people do it. Yeah. Did you have a question?
So did you say the more you boil, the more it will help you?
Yeah.
Strain will help you to sleep or something?
Yeah.
And less you boil,
Yeah, the more you boil, the more decarbed it'll get. Now, it's not like it's like a logarithmic inverse graph. So like the decarb will start and then you're at like 20 minutes and then, it kind of plateaus after a while. But if you go for 2 hours, like you're going to get more of a decarb. It'll be more sedating, potentially, depending on your physiology, but more sedating than if you just boil it for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, yeah.
What about steeping it? Would that be the same? You just let it sit 20 minutes?
You don't. Well, so you need the heat above 170, 180. So if it's steeping and it's not hitting that threshold, then you're not going to get any further decarb, because you really need the combination of heat and acidity to get the decarb further. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a temperature where muscimol degrades?
Yeah, like 230, 240. You don't want to, but that's why boiling is okay. And generally, people will do like a low, like not even a boil, just like a high simmer, But yeah, and like this can get complicated and confusing for some people. The boiling aspect, it's like, don't stress out over it. Like it's not as hard as it sounds. Like it's. I mean, you can play around and generally like a good place to start is just trying the dry mushrooms, and then play around with like brewing some tea up by adding some lemon juice and water to a pot, and just feel the difference and see how it works. But like it doesn't need to be complicated. Like make it easy on yourself, and don't get stressed out about needing to do it properly. Yeah.
A question that would complicate the process.
Yeah.
I've heard of I think it's called soma. It's like is it like a yogurt preparation?
That Dreamer, is this one that Dreamer does? Yeah, yeah.
I'm losing details on that.
Yeah, so it's a bacterial full conversion of Amanita, and her and I have differing opinions on quite a bit of things. But so I don't think that that's exactly what the soma was originally. But it's a full decarb. So if you use fermentation and bacteria, you can get a full decarb. So even doing this, if you were to do this and boil for 2 hours, okay, we'll do this. So in nature, ibotenic acid's up here. Muscimol is down here. When you dry it, that balances out a little bit. When you do it for 20 minutes with lemon and water and boil, maybe there. And then if you do it for 2 hours, you maybe gonna get a little bit there, just a little bit more. When you do the fermentation with bacteria, you get 0 ibotenic acid and all muscimol. Now, I really, really, really think that ibotenic acid is an extraordinarily important part of the experience. So like, I don't really do full conversions at all ever. If I was like wired and needed to sleep, like full conversion, sure, that'd be cool. But I get a great effect from, you know, the tinctures that we have that are pretty decarbed, you know. But yeah, so it's just a full decarb where there's no ibotenic acid. It's all muscimol. Yeah, which has its advantages, but again, I think that other ways are more beneficial most of the time. Yeah.
And what do you think the ibotenic acid does versus the muscimol makes you more sedated? But so what is the ibotenic?
Yeah. So I think the ibotenic acid locks you into flow state. So Amanita is very adaptogenic in the sense that like if you're going to bed, it's going to lock you into going to bed. If like I'm giving a presentation, it locks me into the presentation. I think ibotenic acid is responsible for a lot of that. It really puts you in the flow. It can be, I don't want to say stimulating because it's not stimulating, but yeah, I don't know, flowy. But then the neuroplasticity and most of like the healing and transformational benefits, I think most of those, this is all conjecture on my end, but like this is what it seems like. Most of that comes from the ibotenic acid, or at least the interaction between the three compounds. We call them the holy trio, muscarine, muscimol, and ibotenic acid. So I think it's important for them to all work together. But yeah. But you know, we don't really know. Like we're just kind of figuring all this out as we go, and there's really not much data on any of this. So yeah, like I said, I enjoy a larger hit of ibotenic acid. I like taking it raw from time to time. A lot of people prefer to buy products that have already gone through the decarb process, which is a nice way to go about it. Like that's generally a good way to start. You purchase something that's not the raw mushroom itself, and then you can experience what it's like you can experience the capsules, which are the raw material, or you can experience the gummies, which have gone through a decarb process, and figure out what you like better and then make the tea accordingly. Obviously it's more expensive to get like a gummy than the raw mushroom per dose, but yeah, that's generally how people start.
How long would the dried amanita be still potent?
It's interesting because we get harvest once a year, and the harvest is in fall. So harvest was in like September, October last year. The mushrooms are the most potent for the first 3 months, and then they start losing potency. By the time the next harvest comes in, the potency is at like 60%. So it's starting to drop quick. And then after that harvest comes in, the potency plummets quick. So which is interesting how nature's set it up so that like it stays pretty potent until you get the next harvest in, then it just like drops. But yeah, so like the mushrooms that we have right now, for instance, are not anywhere near, they're maybe like 60s, they're probably like 70-80% as potent as they were in the beginning. Yeah, so it loses potency over time, but that's part of the process. Yeah, one of the most transformative substances on the planet. People report help with and healing of everything from anxiety, depression, to more complex physical ailments like Lyme disease or nerve pain. These are some fun, we have lists and lists and lists of ailments and diseases and disorders that people have claimed that it's like completely cured or helped them with. I think one of the things that and I was talking to somebody about this yesterday somebody had anger issues, and we were talking about it, and the way that I described it was that it gives you space in between your thought processes and your reactions. Not only does it seem to give you space, but it gently nudges you towards choosing the thought or the action that's more aligned with your true self, your higher self, with love. So it gives you space to make a different decision, and it gently nudges you towards that decision. All the while increasing neuronal firing in your brain and building of synapses and neuroplasticity, neural connectivity. So if you're like in a situation that was going to get you angry in the past or like elicit some sort of negative response, it's much easier to not have that response. You're happier, you feel better, you're being gently nudged to the positive. And then when you don't have that response, your brain starts rewiring. And it seems like it's rewiring at a rate that's like unlike anything else. I mean, maybe similar to something like psilocybin or ayahuasca, but with Amanita, you can take it consistently all day. So you can have it during your day-to-day issues when things pop up regularly, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's so profoundly healing and transformational. Yeah. Pain, it's really, really wonderful for pain. We don't have any of the cream with us, unfortunately, but like, yeah, nerve pain, it's phenomenal for. Inflammation, it's really, really phenomenal for. We've had people that have utilized Amanita to get off of kratom and opiates as well, which is really cool. It doesn't hit the opioid receptors, but for some reason, I think it's a lot of the NMDA glutamate activity. For some reason, it works really, really well for getting off of opiates. Really anything, any like SSRIs, you know, antipsychotics, like everything under the sun we've been hearing. And I have personal experience with some of this too, obviously with benzos and other stuff, but it helps with getting off of everything.
Do you know which piece of it helps with pain?
I would imagine it's a mix between the ibotenic acid and the muscimol. So GABA agonism will help with pain a little bit. I don't know if, it'll help with pain. And then ibotenic acid, like dissociating slightly from the pain would help as well. Yeah. Deep inner healing from microdosing or large doses, like it does crazy work on inner, it does a lot of its work behind the scenes, it seems like. So like it works on the subconscious and the unconscious mind quite a lot, particularly while you're sleeping. So you can really work through some stuff without having to, you know, of course, if we address it, you know, consciously, it's going to be better. But it does seem to do a lot of really, really powerful work behind the scenes. Yeah, as I was mentioning, that inner critic quiets down, was replaced by an inner confidence. In the early days, I was doing these Zoom meetings and just like guiding people through their experiences. And I had a woman come in, and we're all doing month-long microdosing regimens. And she comes in, she's 2 weeks into the regimen. She's like, I'm not really noticing anything. I'm not sure. I think I maybe feel something, but I'm not sure what's going on. I was like, okay, you know, and I gave her some pointers and we talked. And a month later, we had our next meeting, and she was 2 weeks out of her regimen at this point. So she had completed her month-long regimen. She comes in and she's just beaming. And she was like, I didn't realize it last time, but I figured it out. That voice in my head that's been critiquing me my entire life, it's been gone. It's been gone the whole time. And she's like, but I haven't been watching my thoughts. So like it's not something that I watch consistently, so I didn't notice. And I think that's, you know, with any transformation that one's looking to accomplish, like watch your thoughts, watch your behaviors, watch your reactions. We got to be conscious and cognizant of what we're going through and dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, that inner critic quiets down quite a bit and is replaced by something powerful and magical. It seems to give weight to our thoughts as well, which is really, really cool, creating new neural pathways. And then as I mentioned, neural pathways, but manifestation gets really, really interesting on Amanita. Your vibrations raise, weight to your thoughts, you're able to make things come into existence much more effectively. Synchronicity is fucking insane on Amanita. Gabe and I can attest to this quite a bit, like the amount of synchronicity, and I'm sure a lot of people experience this on psilocybin and stuff too, but if you could experience it in your day-to-day life consistently, not just when you're on a psychedelic substance, like it gets pretty profound, it gets pretty unreal. And then, yeah, most of the time, these effects seem to last, at least to some extent, indefinitely, long after they stop microdosing or taking Amanita. So, like I mentioned, rewiring of the brain, rewiring of the neural pathways. Yeah. Happier and jolly. It is the Santa Claus mushroom. So, yeah.
Do you have experience with, or know of experience with using it topically for nerve pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we sell a topical. I don't have any here, but it's the best. So I have a fun story about that. Like this is all stuff that we're discovering as we go about. Like, and so we originally, like Dreamer had talked about it a little bit for this, but I hadn't seen it in action. And I was at Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles a few years ago, and we had some topical that we just made. And a woman came up with neurology, whatever it is, in her face, neuropathy, thank you, I knew this, in her face from a stroke, and so half of her face was sunk in, and we gave her some to try, and she was like, I'm in pain 24/7 ever since I had this stroke, like my face hurts, and we gave her some to try, and she went off and walked around, and it was like 2 minutes later that she came back with tears, like rolling down her face. She says, the first time I've been pain-free in years. So it works extraordinarily well for nerve pain, we've found. It works great for inflammation. I have knee issues, and I'll throw it on my knee every now and then, or back stuff, but it really shines with nerve pain, yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about sciatica, because I have like a lot of people that
have
sciatica.
For sure, yeah.
Your muscle rev working really, really well. And my whole spine is fused together, and I have nerve damage on either side, and it's the only thing. I've tried St. John's wort over time, like THC, the only thing that has helped has been the Amanita Muscaria.
Oh, sweet.
Cool. All right, so dosing Amanita. So we're looking at different dosing than psilocybin. A lot of people get a little freaked out when they hear the Amanita dosing because like a 2 gram microdose, like 2 grams of psilocybin, that's definitely not a microdose. But with Amanita, it's a little bit different. So 0.2 to 2 grams is generally a microdose. Most people find their sweet spot around half a gram. I think Gabe and I personally find our sweet spot at around 1 gram if we're microdosing. And then like, you know, microdose is supposed to be relatively subperceptual, maybe slightly perceptual. But then with microdosing, you know, you take it consistently for the transformation it elicits over time. We'll get into that in a minute. But low dose kind of starts at around 2 grams. So as I mentioned, I'm on 3.5 grams right now. It's a low dose, very functional, just relaxed and locked in and happy, and I'm able to flow a little bit better. High doses, and pretty much everybody, I don't think I've ever found anybody that doesn't like the low dose. The worst that we ever hear is it doesn't work for me. And generally, again, like I mentioned, that means that they're not ready for it. They're not looking at it properly. They're looking to get fucked up or whatever it may be. They're just not ready. Some people don't. Maybe some people don't get anything from it at all, but the majority of people, it just mean that they're not ready for it. Medium dose, 5 to 10 grams. This is where it gets a little bit more. And trippy is not the right word because it's not trippy. I can drive on a dose up to like 6 or 7 grams just fine, but things get glitchy. I don't know if glitchy is the right. Do you have any comments on the beginning, early? Jolly. Jolly. Yeah, jolly.
I'd say closer to 10 grams. It's like a jolliness that can be matched with a bit of quietness.
Yeah, dreamy for sure. Yep. Strong dose would be like 10 to 15 grams, large dose. And then heroic dose is 15 grams plus. Heroic doses are fascinating. I absolutely love them. Most people don't like them. Most people don't like them. I absolutely love them. I've never found something, I've done it all. We were talking about this yesterday, except for iboga, which I'm going to be doing soon. I've done it all. Nothing brings me closer to God. And nothing brings me, psychedelics, tryptamines, whatever, will bring me close to otherworldly things. They bring me close to other dimensions. They bring me close to aspects of myself. Amanita brings me close to me, to God, to the divine. Like, that's what it does. And heroic doses of it are really, really special. The real special part comes when you're waiting to go to sleep. That's when the magic happens. And you can enter these spaces and pull these threads. The threads get pulled for you that I can't even, not only can I not bring them to words, I can't filter them through my brain because they're so far out there from like this current reality. But every time you can pull a little bit back, you can pull a little bit more back, and you can pull a little bit more back. And every time for me, I get a little bit closer to divinity and a little bit closer to myself. But yeah, really special in high doses, but it can be really uncomfortable. Like some people, it's an uncomfortable experience in a high dose. It's not very like comfortable. People get like, you get involuntary muscle spasms, which can freak a lot of people out. If that ever happens on Amanita, like don't freak out. It's just part of it. I personally think that it's blocks being, blasted through, energetic barriers and energetic blocks. But yeah, that's an aspect that people get concerned about. But yeah.
For a heroic dose, like that's the way you're describing it. What have you heard anything or had any of your own experience, like if someone has like PTSD or PTSD that hasn't really been addressed?
I wouldn't do a heroics dose, yeah, personally. I would, but that being said, I would do microdosing and I would pepper in, if I was facilitating this person and guiding them through it, depending on the person obviously, but generally, I would recommend microdosing consistently. So I think we get into this in a second, but microdosing, we're talking 2 to 3 times a day, every day, for months or however long one wants to do it. And then I would pepper in some low doses, and then I would pepper in some medium doses. That's where I would start. And honestly, by 6 months of that, like particularly if they're intentional with it, then I'm sure they can handle a heroic dose. But again, not everybody likes the heroic dose, so yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. Yeah.
You also saw the tincture, so this is the dry weight?
Yeah, yep, this is dry weight, yeah.
Is it clear kind of what the transfer?
For sure, yeah. One dropper of the tincture is a half gram's worth, yep. Yeah.
For the hero dose, is that like just more intense effects for the same amount of time, or does it last substantially longer than any lower dose?
It can last a little bit longer, but it's nothing crazy. Yeah, generally the whole experience is going to be 6 to 8 hours. With the hero's dose, like I'm out of the full. I generally always fall asleep. Like at the end of the experience, one falls asleep generally. But it's maybe like 10 hours, maybe 10 hours.
And for these other dose strains, understanding, yes, it's very personal and individual. Like you mentioned, microdosing 3 times a day. Is that like, if you're using this, you know, as kind of a treatment for a chronic condition, is that kind of the frequency that one would typically follow unless your needs, you know,
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Some people do once a day. Some people do 2. It seems that the best results are do it when it's done morning, afternoon, and night. Yeah.
I have one more quick.
Yeah.
What does a gram of dried mushroom even look like? Do you have like a packet up there that you can?
Come to our booth. So we have a booth down in the vendor village. I expect to see every single one of you there at some point during the day. But yeah, come down to the booth and we'll show you. But it's generally good to get a scale. But the other way, get capsules or get gummies or something like that. You know, obviously the mushrooms are the most economical, of course. But yeah, come to the booth and we'll play around and show you a little bit. Cool. Anything else? Yes.
I have a question for tincturing as like a process.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a double extraction, and then do you add like a citrus element to it?
So we basically, I'm not going to give the whole process away, but essentially we mimic the tea. And we use citric acid instead of lemon. And we get it to the decarb level that we want, and then we purge the liquid off, and then we're left with a paste that we then, you know, further refine to get a powder, and then that gets put into H2O and a little bit of ethanol, and that's basically it. It's pretty simple. Yeah.
But it's all the fruiting body. There's no like mycelium in this sort of like process.
All the caps, just the caps. Yeah. Now the stems do contain the compounds in them, but they contain it to a lesser degree, maybe like a quarter to a fifth to a quarter is kind of the narrative. So we don't get the stems in. I've utilized the stems before. I like it, but it's just like cost effectiveness economically. It's a lot to ship, and you know, it doesn't quite make sense.
You're getting them. Some of these foraging before you're not cultivating them.
Yep. So Amanita is mycorrhizal, just like morels, or you know, so you can't really farm them in mass quantities, or at least it hasn't been figured out yet. So, and I don't have the capacity to forage the amount of mushrooms that we go through. So we import. We work with, you know, with all the products that we have, we work with 30, 40 families, individuals around the world. That with Amanita, it's like 5 or 6 main people and then a bunch of smaller people, but all over the world, primarily Eastern Europe, Ukraine and Russia are actually the countries that we get them from the most, which is, you know, fun right now. That was really fun a couple years ago. And then, you know, the Baltic Sea region, the Nordic region, yeah. And it's interesting too, each region seems to have like a different cannabis strain almost. Like it's slightly subjective different effects. For like if one's not familiar, they may not really notice a difference. But for me, like I can really notice a difference from like the Baltic Sea region versus the Carpathian Mountain Range region versus the Siberian region. And so that's another interesting aspect that one can play around with once they get into it. I've never done any Maine mushrooms, so hook it up, you know, when harvest comes, like send us some and I'll let you know. Yeah. Seriously. No, seriously. Yeah, for real. No, that's 100% serious. So like if anybody's foraging, like find them. Yeah, and I'm sure you guys get this with regular mushrooms in general, but Amanita specifically absorbs cadmium like really, really, really well. So if we're close to anything, then this is another aspect of this is I just got word that a bunch of Belarusians are selling radioactive Amanita, and this is part of the market. Like this stuff happens. Like so we're very, very, very diligent about the people that we work with and where the Amanita has been getting found. And like I can't attest to anybody else in the industry, but yeah, I know what we do, and I know our Amanita is safe and clean. So that's another important aspect.
Does it make a difference on the color?
As far as like red shading, or are you talking like the different? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So okay, this is probably a very important point. So Amanita is a huge family of mushrooms, and the most poisonous mushrooms in the world are in the Amanita. I don't know if it's a family or a genus. Does anybody know? One or the other. Genus. Thank you. The most poisonous mushrooms, the death cap, the destroying angel. Those are Amanitas. So when I'm talking about Amanita, I'm really talking about Muscaria, which is the red-capped one. With white dots. And then there's the ones that I found in Minnesota that you might have here in Maine, which is the Gasoi variety, which is orange-capped with white dots. That being said, there are other orange-capped Amanita varieties that are also psychoactive. There are ones that are not psychoactive. So it gets a little confusing. The easiest ones to identify are the Muscaria and the Muscaria varieties. But then there's also Amanita pantherina, which is a brown cap, like a light brown cap with white dots. And then there's Amanita regalis, which is a darker brown cap with white dots. And pantherina is 6 times stronger than Muscaria, and regalis is 3 times stronger than Muscaria. And they all have a different texture to the experience, we'll say. But yeah, so it can, I'm not like a forager. I'm a businessman. I'm trying to help heal the world. So I'm not the best person to talk about foraging, but like, of course, always make sure identification is done properly. Yeah. All right. Most people microdose, as I mentioned. Most people use the gummies, chocolates, capsules, ready-made products, ready to go. You don't have to go through the tea making process. Although it gets fun when you go into the ritualistic aspect of it, but you can really put intention into it. Generally take 1 to 2 units 2 to 3 times a day. That's the general protocol. Units being like a square of the chocolates or a single gummy or a single capsule. It's always important to figure out what dose works the best for you. It's always good to start low and go slow. That's just standard practice with any substance.